Thank you very much, and I appreciate the invitation to come, and especially Singapore Swimming Association for having me over to work with them on a regular basis. You guys have an amazing country. We all have our faults. I've had 2 cab rides out here yesterday and today, 2 different cab drivers in their 50s, and I got an education from both on different political points of view about the country and different information about the country. And it's just wonderful. You know, again, just the previous presentation is so forward thinking, you know, in terms of giving coaches representation and giving coaches a voice. I told Troy, as being self-employed until I turned 65, every January 1st, before I made any money, I had to pay $15,000 a year health insurance, because you have no bargaining power when you have an organization. So anyway, so thank you. It's wonderful to be here. So what I want to share with you today is a bit about the physical preparation and a bit about training, which is obviously a lot of my career and my area of expertise, but my passion is coaching. I started out as an athletics coach. I had an amazing coach as a high school basketball coach who was also a history teacher. He didn't coach basketball, he taught us basketball. But he taught us values, he taught us how to be better people. I got kicked out of practice 5 straight days. He wouldn't even say a word. I'd make a face or talk back to him, he'd point to the door. And on the 6th day, he ran the little student store. And I went up and I needed a new pencil. I put a dime down on the thing, and he said, Vernon, he said, would you like to play? And I said, well, and it was Mr. Keel. And I said, well, of course, Mr. Keel. And he says, well, maybe you should try finishing practice one day. And so I finished practice and I got to play, right? So again, that was a lesson. And he didn't yell at me. He didn't scream at me. He just took the game away, which I really like to play, right? So anyway, so we'll get down and look at some things. Building on basics. And I'm going to tell you some stories as we go along. One of my, and this guy's an interesting dude, because not only was he a great musician, but he was a great spokesman for his people and a great spokesman for social causes, okay, right? Bob Marley. And this is one of my favorite songs, probably my top 10 favorite songs, is Redemption Song. And if you go look on your Google Play or whatever those things I use, not Spotify. I don't know what I use, but I listen to it anyway. And this is what I want you to think about. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. And so much of what I hear in coaching is mental slavery. Oh, we do it that way. We already did that. It didn't work. Well, I'm doing things today in 2018 that didn't work in 1988. And if I said, oh, it just didn't work, how would we make progress? So the first message here is emancipate yourself from mental slavery, okay? Now, I'm 71 years old, started teaching 50 years ago, and this isn't my gym class, but every day the gym classes did this. Okay, look at these kids. This is a gym class, a PE class. This isn't sports team. The fattest kid in the school is the kid on the right. Okay, and this was put up as the exemplary school in the United States, La Sierra High School. And you can search online for that. And they had a trunk system. That's the way we were. And so it was easy to develop athletes out of that, right? Because they had a tremendous foundation in physical preparation. Okay? Now let's fast forward to 2018. Okay? That's a little bit scary. And what makes it even more scary now, and this is an implication for you in Singapore and for us in the United States and everywhere. So what are you going to do? I mean, you can bring me in. I can get them, 3 or 4% body fat less maybe and things like that. But we've got a deal. And so what that means is simply this. 20th century answers will not solve 21st century problems. Okay? And that's what I want to present to you. I don't want to be negative. I want to present you with some things, some thoughts, some motivation that we can take and forestall this, stop this, reverse some trends, okay, to be able to give us a healthy population. And then the bonus is people standing on the podium. All right? Everybody okay with that? Sport competition occurs in an information-rich, dynamic environment that requires complex coordination patterns to produce optimum performance. I can summarize that in 2 words. I mean, it's much simpler than that. Is look at all those sports, and obviously we could put all kinds of sports up there. But sports is sporting movements, and human movement is complex. But there's a lot of relationships. Everybody wants to say, well, my sport is different, or that. No, it's not. And that's what I want to show you, because we're talking about human movement here now, okay, and what we have to do. I'm here, so I'm going to use some swimming examples, because my work here in Singapore is with swimming and then having coffee with Troy as frequently as we can to solve coaching problems. So, and a lot of my work today is both in the States too, even though my background is athletics, is with swimming. And so at the end of the journey, each year, our journey this year hopefully is World Championships for the senior kids, right? At the end of the journey, all physical limitations are eradicated, and the swimmer is ready technically, tactically, physically, and psychologically to compete to win. You could substitute water polo player, you could substitute field hockey player, it doesn't matter. That transcends sport, doesn't it? At the end of the day, at the end of the journey, that's where we have to be competitive, not just at the Asian Games level, at the world level, but within Singapore. Okay? So that's a big task. And this is my personal mission statement as a athletic development coach. Okay? And again, this transcends sport. That basically to instill a culture of daily physical preparation that grows and nurtures. Now here's the key word here. Adaptable athletes who understand the wisdom of their bodies, its ability to self-organize and solve movement problems. And when I say an adaptable athlete, that means that athlete can handle adversity. They're not so just locked into being in the weight room to get strong that they can't transfer that to the water, to the field and that. Okay? And they're robust so that when different things happen, they don't get hurt, they bounce back. Okay? And I think that's a really important part of this. Thoroughly understand, when I say the spectrum demands of your sport, know your sport. Make no assumptions. I had somebody about a year ago say, well, how have you worked with all the sports that you've worked with? Because I've worked with virtually every major sport in North America, plus some that, I don't know if cricket's played in North America, I guess, and that, but and have been able to, fortunately, work with some coaches that were really patient with me and helped me to understand that. And in today's world, there's no excuse for making assumptions about your sport. We just saw the little heat map on basketball there, okay? And a lot of times what we've been told traditionally that occurs in the sport isn't what really happens. And so, like I say, there's no excuse for not conditioning what's happening in your respective sport. Okay, rather than being bound by tradition, know your sport. Know the positions or events in your sport. Know your athletes. Okay? And then you're going to be able to do a better job coaching that particular sport. All right? The coaching process is, this is a famous coach, happens to be a swim coach, but I never met him, but I would count him as a mentor because his book, Science of Swimming, was something that I probably read 3 times a year for the first 10 years of coaching. Okay? Even though I wasn't coaching swimmers, I was coaching track and field. And this was Doc Counselman. And all of you as coaches go online. That's the beauty today. You can go online and find out information. He was a genius. He looked at swimming differently. He revolutionized the sport because he was willing to do things differently. He found out that if he tested vertical jump every day, that would be an indicator of how the training effect of what he was doing in the water. He also found out that the people with better vertical jumps, and you say, well, this is obvious for him, but this was 70 years ago, 60 years ago, were the better sprinters, okay? And the coaching process process of coaching is principle driven. What are the principles that underlie training for your sport? Foundation in pedagogy. That's the biggest thing. For me now, the biggest thing is, for all of you younger coaches, is how do you teach? Pedagogy is how you teach. Okay, that was probably the thing that was drilled into my generation of coaches. We were trained as teachers. Supported by science, not driven by science. Supported by science, not driven by science. Forged in experience and proven and tested in the competitive arena. What the hell works? What works, right? What produces results? I had an acrimonious meeting with a strength and conditioning coach about 10 years ago at a university where we had produced really good results with their women's swim team in cooperation with the coach. And he said to me, how do you know your program works? The dryland program that we put in. And I pointed to the water. And he said, well, you can't prove to me. Well, I don't care. Does the stopwatch lie, right? Ultimately, that's the arbiter. What happens in the competitive arena, okay? That's what we have to remember, okay? Coaching is a creative process. We are artists. I think the best coaches I've been around have an artistic eye. They may not. I'm terrible. I get a microphone up here and I want to channel my inner Johnny Cash. Do you all know who Johnny Cash is? He's dead now. The man in black, right? Boy Named Sue, and I won't. Otherwise, I was going to start singing, but I won't. Okay, I won't do that to you. But it is. I find myself, and I think I said this to Stefan the other day. I find myself more and more talking about rhythm and tempo, and having the athlete express themselves. The older I get, I see that part of it. It's a creative process. But look at that creative process. It's not linear, is it? Who knows where eventually you're going to end up where you need to go. And people go, God, that's really crazy. That used to depress me. Now I think this is really exciting because you never know where it's going to go. And sometimes that 14-year-old boy or 14-year-old girl that just looks like there is no way all of a sudden 4 years later is on that straight line on that journey. And, because we didn't try to fit them into a mold, right? That's the biggest mistake that I made as a coach. Creating robots, fitting people into a mold. Oh, that's not technically correct. Wait a minute, let's take a step back and let's see how you express yourself, okay? That's part of it too, and how you express yourself as a coach. So here's a real strong message to support, and I'll support this by a story. Know the basics, master the basics, and don't deviate from the basics. When I left professional baseball in 1996, the next day I started in pro soccer. Okay, and at the same time working in pro soccer, I was working with youth soccer, usually U12s, U14s, okay, doing agility, speed development, conditioning, that kind of stuff. And then in 1998, I got the opportunity to be the conditioning coach for the U.S. World Cup soccer team, which would be a whole other experience. It was the worst team ever, and they were the worst conditioned team ever. And I was the conditioning coach for that team. I can tell you that at the World Cup level, you can't condition a team for the World Cup on 10 minutes a day. It's not possible, okay? So, but the lesson, we would practice up at Disney Wide World of Sports, which is about 90 minutes away in Florida from Sarasota where I live. And we would practice with the World Cup team in the morning. And I'd see movement errors, soccer technical errors the World Cup guys would do, right? And they make mistakes. You have pro players, World Cup players make mistakes. And I go down and work with a U12 The U14 team was my daughter's team, and guess what? Same mistakes. And after driving back and forth enough days, I go, it's still about the basics, isn't it? What we need to do with the World Cup team is work harder on basics, maybe. Because it was going to be the basics, and that's what cost them. That's why they were the worst world team, 32 out of 32, okay, in terms of how you measure it. So the message is, don't forget basics, and it's not sexy. It's not sexy, but you've got to work on basics every day, and habits, good habits, okay? Here's the other thing. Coaches come to clinics, to things. You'll come to my workshop this afternoon, and everybody will sit back while I'm talking about it. And then as soon as I show an exercise or something, everybody will write now, right? Yes, I know it will happen, but okay, I see it all over the world, okay? But what's most important is understand why. And I want the coaches to challenge. Stefan should be able to come to me anytime and say, Vern, why are you doing that exercise? And I should be able to give him a reason. And I should be able to go to you anytime and say, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that drill? And that you should have a reason for it, okay? Because without the why, it's just a bunch of stuff. And so if you're good enough just doing stuff and making people tired, you'll get a little bit better, but you won't be consistent, okay? So that's important. To me, coaching is solving mysteries. Solving mysteries. I'm a big fan of... my wife and I love watching these BBC different detective mystery things and that. When I was a teenager, I loved reading Sherlock Holmes. I read all the different Sherlock Holmes stories, right? And I think as coaches, we have to be like Sherlock Holmes, right? And mysteries are not like puzzles. So the puzzle is what? You put a crossword puzzle, or you put a jigsaw puzzle out, and sooner or later, all the pieces fill in, right? And you solve the puzzle and you walk away. Coaching is a constant mystery. Okay, just when you think you've got it solved, you have to go forward. It's murkier, it's less well defined. There's no definite answers. Just when you think you figure it out, I can tell you the exact day and year when I had it figured out, and then the next year the whole world changed. My whole world changed. Okay? I'd never had a stress fracture before. All of a sudden you have a stress fracture. This is with track and field athletes. Well, wait a minute. What's going on? What happened? So it's understand the whys and the hows. Okay? And to me, that makes going out to the pool or out to the track or out to the field every day really exciting, because I'm Sherlock Holmes. I get to solve mysteries all the time, right? And Leonardo da Vinci is you'd all agree, pretty smart dude, right? Huh? And this is what he said. I love this quote. And I always pick a picture of dance, and I've got one this afternoon too, because dance to me epitomizes the grace, the rhythm, what we want with our athletes. Study the science of art and study the art of science. Develop your senses. Especially learn how to see. Realize that everything connects to everything else. Everything connects to everything else. And as soon as you get that understanding in your sport, I think you'll make quantum leaps forward as a coach. Who's that? Sir Roger Bannister just passed away last year, I guess, right? And amazing guy, right? Broke the 4-minute mile, trained an hour, he had an hour a day devoted to training, including changing and showering at either end, right? And broke the first man to break 4 minutes in the mile. Everybody said, physiologically, you can't do it. If you break 4 minutes in the mile, your heart will explode. Well, he ended up a preeminent neurosurgeon. And he goes, this can't be. That's a myth, okay? And here's a quote that he said later on that I love, and I use it in every presentation I give anywhere on any topic, because I think it's really relevant. The human body is centuries in advance of the physiologist. It can perform an integration of heart, lungs, and muscles, which is too complex for the scientist to analyze. Now we're chasing the 2-hour marathon. And one of my colleagues, Dr. Michael Joyner at the Mayo Clinic, was the first guy to write from a physiological perspective to say, yes, this is possible, this is what you have to do. Now we're flirting with it, and we're flirting with it, and we're flirting with it. And everybody's saying basically the same, virtually except Michael Joyner and a few people, the same things they were saying about the 4-minute mile, okay? But we as coaches specialize in breaking barriers and put no limits on your potential as a coach and your athlete's potential, okay? The body is self-organizing. This guy has no idea what's on the other side of that wall, right? You ever watch parkour? It's pretty fascinating. The moral of this story is, figure it out. Give your athlete a problem and let them figure it out. Have the courage as a coach to have given them the background, and then say, and with your kids, you do the same thing. Figure it out. Figure it out. Okay? But you have to have a lot of self-assurance in yourself as a coach, and you have to give them some background. You just don't say, go out there now, figure it out, the first time you go out to the rugby pitch. But the more as you advance as a coach and your athletes advance, you have to give them more and more space to grow. And I think Rick's slide that he put up yesterday showed that, that it became more and more athlete-centered. I say a lot less now. I used to talk all the time during work. I love to talk. But I don't say very much. Jimmy Radcliffe, my good friend at University of Oregon, who's probably best athletic development coach in the world, same thing. Very few words, but when the words are spoken, they're very powerful. Okay, they're meaningful. All right? Body's a dynamic system. The coach is a facilitator instead of the informant. This was said yesterday in the nonlinear pedagogy talk. You facilitate rather than inform. So if your athletes are always looking to you for feedback, I don't think you've done a good job coaching personally. Even sometimes with kids, is give them situations where they can figure it out. The coach identifies and manipulates key constraints to guide the athlete's search for optimum movement patterns. And I'll give you some examples in my session this afternoon, just with gait, that you can play little games to have them identify. Respect them, the wisdom of the body. We all know that our fingerprints are individual, right? Well, it's true with each athlete. The body is a self-organizing, dynamic, organic system, and every body is different, and know and respect it. I had the opportunity several different times. Well, there's three twins. You can't have 3 twins. You have triplets. Okay? And they all swim at University of Georgia now, but they were on one of the teams that I work with. Triplets. And one made the Olympic team in the U.S. and medaled in that. But same sessions, same training sessions, same dryland sessions, very, very different individual responses. Okay, very different individual responses. Just to remind you, now you could say, Vern, you were pretty stupid. You should have, once you figured it out, you should have given them different sessions. Yes, I should have, but I didn't. So anyway, you live and learn. Okay, where does it start? We evolved from a lower species. We evolved into a bipedal. So now we're upright, and everybody look at me, not the slide. As I'm walking across the stage, watch what happens. Without thinking about it, if I start thinking about it, I go like this, right? And what happened? My arms move in opposition to my legs. My shoulders move counter-rotating to my hips. I don't have to think about it. That just happens, okay? Now, I'll show you the example from swimming, because that's why I'm here. Okay? You swim like you walk in freestyle swimming. That's Kate Ledecky. Okay? I think it is. And if you just look at the right arm's forward, the left arm is back. That's just the way the body works. So we have to tap into how the body works. It's foolish to try to work against the body, work with the body. And the same thing here, I tried to find a picture from Straight On, Stefan. You got to help me. But so you see, that's seeing the body from above, right? From above, my shoulders rotate this way, and my hips are back this way. So now, how can I take advantage of this? Do you think that's important in throwing, in striking? Okay, start taking a look differently. Don't do this literally, but take the uniform off your athletes and look at how they move. Okay, and you see, like if you see sprinters from in front, particularly the women's sprinters that wear the bear, you see how the action of the abs in that working in opposition to the arms and shoulders. So that should be our clue as to how we're going to train the athlete. Okay? We do a lot less ab work or core work in swimming, lying and seated and prone or supine, than we do walking and moving. And at first, some of the swim coaches go, well, that doesn't work. Well, it's working. It's working. Forget muscle activation and individual firing. I could have you all sit there and say, now I want you to suck in and I want you to activate your internal oblique and transverse abdominis. Okay, do that now. Okay, now I want you to move. Right? How many of you are old enough to have been in that era where everybody had to walk around sucking in their abs and trying to move it in the water? Okay? Pretty hard to do. Okay? Instead, think coordination and muscle synergies. How do the parts of the body work together? How do they link? How do we get better coordinated? Okay? What shapes and postures can you make? We were talking, where's the synchro coach? We were talking earlier. That's all synchro swimming is what kind of shapes and postures can you make in the water? If I'm striking, if I'm a cricket batter and I'm going to hit the ball, that's a different shape than if I have to go feel the ball. Okay? So what shapes do you need to make and what shapes can you make? Like in this case, we have to reconcile the two in order to swim fast. If I can't make that prerequisite shape, then we have to figure out how do we strengthen, how do we lengthen, how do we change that technique, right? So think of your sport differently. Think of it as shapes and postures and poses and positions, and then reconcile what they have to do with what they do, okay? Ask yourself, is what you're doing linking body parts? But most important link is what? In training, are you linking what you're doing in training to what happens in the competitive venue? Okay? Connecting body parts, connecting to the competitive venue and coordinating. Okay? So I would say, like I worked in professional baseball, and if you know anything of baseball, it's a game of speed and power. It's not a game of endurance. And I had this infield coach, and he said to me, well, why don't you test a mile run? And I said, Doug, I said, first of all, are you watching the same game I'm watching? And I said, a player in baseball doesn't run a mile in the course of a season. They run on and off the field. Maybe that's the greatest distance they run. And they don't run. So what the hell do you want me to test them in a mile for? Right? All I'm going to do is take away explosiveness. And it's a game of explosiveness. So, story after story. So I'll talk about strength training now. So I'm going to talk about swimming because that's what I'm working with here. So it's coordination training with appropriate resistance. Now, we don't have to make them big, and we don't have to be able to lift a house, but we have to be able to handle our body weight, right? In the water. We have to make shapes. I have to be able to hold water, which takes a lot of strength through my upper quadrant and that down into my hips. I have to achieve effective streamline positions, okay? Because that's the less frontal surface I put to the water, the more I'm going to slip through the water, okay? Resist gravity. Yes, there is gravity. Gravity keeps water in the pool, and it also, you have to do that at the start and use ground reaction forces at start and turns. So if you come and watch our strength training program, it's probably going to look a little different than a rugby prop, okay? It's probably going to look a little different It's going to maybe look a little bit more like a cricket fast bowler on some things, some of the upper quadrant things. That's where we pick stuff from. So think about that. Be critical. Look at what you're doing. I think it was a movie, right? What happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. You all know Las Vegas is like Sin City, right? People go there to get married, do other things, lose a lot of money, right? So they say what happens in Las Vegas stays in what happens. My line has become what happens in the weight room oftentimes stays in the weight room. What happens oftentimes in the weight room stays in the weight room. If what you're doing in the weight room is not transferring to what you do in the pool, on the track, on the pitch, on the court, then you better think about what your strength training program is about. It's a means to an end, not an end unto itself. Okay? It's a means to an end, not an end unto itself. I don't care how much you can bench press, how many times your body weight you can squat if it doesn't transfer to the game. Okay? And we can maybe talk about that more this afternoon. Why do we do overhead squats in swimming? Just like use this as an example. And Stefan wasn't here last week, and I showed it to some of the swimmers. Well, look at that. That's why we want them to break parallel when they do squat. And that's why we want them to do overhead squat, because they get in that position one time in the 50 they don't, 100 once, and then it multiplies as they go up. And the 1,500-meter swimmer does that how many times, Stefan? 29 times. So if they can't do that, so that's like free distance, you guys. They work their ass off to swim 1,500 meters, but if they can't do that, they give up a second a lap. Okay? So we train the kinetic chain, and it has a direct connection to water. And you see right away, if the kids can't overhead squat, we can get them better, and it transfers to the water. Okay? Not how much, by the way. It's how well they can get that posture. How am I doing time-wise? Okay, always start with a strong foundation. My son is getting his PhD in architecture, and I got an education about 6 weeks ago downtown Sarasota where I live. It's kind of like Singapore. There's more cranes and buildings going up, it's than anything going. And he said, we're walking by this new building, and he said, Dad, I'm not sure about this place. And it was the foundation. And I said, well, look. And I said, well, what's the deal? And he said, rebar. And I didn't know what rebar was. I just called them iron bars. And he said, they don't have enough rebar per square meter. And he said, I would never buy a condo in this place or something like that. Now, we don't have earthquakes in Sarasota, but I thought, so when I was getting ready for this talk, I thought, well, look at how much rebar there is, right? See all those bars? Before they ever put the concrete in, what's going to give the structural integrity to this building is going to be the rebar. So for us as coaches, what's the rebar? The rebar is physical literacy. If you don't know the ABCs, how can you write a sentence? How can you spell a word, right? How can you write a sentence? And we're doing this to our kids today. We're asking them to write term papers, and some of them can't spell. Term papers mean we're sending them out in high-level competition, and they don't really know their ABCs. No? You agree or not? Basics, right? Basics of movement, okay? So, what's physical literacy? What you do on the playground. What you do in free play. Without any instruction. It should be an adult-free zone, okay? Ability to express levels of force production, force reduction, and stabilization in general movement. Walking, running, lunging, bending, pushing, climbing. All the things you did when you were a kid. And you fell out of the tree and you broke your arm. Yeah, so what? When I was a kid, if you got a cast, it was kind of like a badge of honor. You had this white cast, and everybody wanted to sign their names. And you hoped the really pretty girl that sat next to you in class wanted to sign your class, your thing too, right? That was kind of cool. All right? Well, anyway, but you get the idea, okay? All right, so here, now, this is a real simple schematic to think about. We start with physical literacy, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all that, right? Okay, so we know that. And we're going to put that, we're going to learn how to spell. Cat, C-A-T. Dog, D-U-G, D-U-G? D-O-G, okay, D-O-G. Okay? Like that, right? And so we got that down. We get that down, and we put it together in a sentence, right? Think about when you're in elementary school. This was a long time ago, but see Jane run, or see John jump, or something like that, okay? So that's good. Then the next step we take is we go to physical competence. So we take those simple sentences, and what do? We start to put them together a little bit. We put them in paragraphs, okay? So we look for relationships. And you even start to learn what? Punctuation. That's important, isn't it? In terms of writing or communicating. In any language, it's important, right? So we've got physical competence. So we've got people being able to put movements, simple movements together, chaining them into two things. We run and jump. We might run, jump, and throw. Okay? And in different sequences, but not in any particular order. Then we go to sport-specific skill or technique. Well, now we're going to write that first 500-word essay. Now we're going to learn how to bowl with we're going to learn we knew how to throw, now we're going to learn how to cricket bowl. Or we're going to learn how to shoot a basketball or shoot a netball or whatever it may be. Okay? So we've got to really be able to move these, put things around. We have to have mastered our spelling, all the punctuation marks in that, right? And then ultimately what happens is we put it together in sports performance. What is sport performance? We do it under pressure. We do it without specific scripts, right? Because you don't know necessarily how the match or the game or the race is going to go, right? And so it's like this cycle has to keep repeating itself. And if there's problems with sport performance or sport-specific technique, what do? We need to go back a step, don't we? And I can tell you that working mostly with high-level athletes now, that every day we spend a certain amount of time reviewing ABCs. And you have to, okay? And here's the other part of sport today that really concerns me. At the elite level and at the youth level and at the beginning level are injuries. Injuries, we know more today than we know at any time in history about sport performance, yet injuries are off the scale. You go to the EPL this Saturday and it'd be like hamstrings will pull like shooting ducks on a pond. Okay? It's ridiculous. You know why? Because we're doing stupid stuff. And we're asking them to write a novel, and we're not working on the fundamentals of movement, okay? So I'm passionate about this. It's so simple, you guys. But don't get the idea that because you're working with elite athletes or you aspire to a high level, that you just have to tick the box and I'm now physically literate, okay? You've got to keep reviewing that and refining it, okay? All right. Fundamental movement skills before specific sports skills. Crawling, hopscotch, climbing walls. I spend a lot of time at Starbucks is my office around the world. The lease terms are very good. You just have to buy a tea or something and you can sit there, right? And every place but Singapore, you can get easy Wi-Fi access. I haven't figured that one out here yet, but with all your technical things, I can't get on Wi-Fi at Starbucks. But we'll talk to the sports minister or somebody about that, okay? But climbing is a great. All climbing is vertical crawling. You don't think about it that way, do you? You know, skipping rope. All of these activities that kids used to do and play, we're going to have to recreate, okay? So, athleticism. A few years ago, some of my colleagues and I said, we always talk about athleticism. What's the definition? And we're all doing like isometric shoulder shrugs, like, I don't know. And so we came up with this definition. The ability to perform athletic movements, run, jump, and throw at optimum speed with precision, style, and grace in the context of your sport. Optimum speed with precision, style, and grace in the context. And precision, style, and grace, probably 30 years ago or 40 years ago, that's not macho enough, man. I can't say that. Well, I'm not afraid to say that in any venue, go into a rugby locker room, an NFL locker room, or whatever. Because sport is about precision, style, and grace at the highest levels. Okay, when you're expressing optimum technique, isn't it? So that's what we're eventually seeking and working on is higher levels of athleticism. Now I'm going to show you some video. This is from one of my Gain faculty members, and this guy's a brilliant teacher, Greg Thompson, and I always forget. He has his kids put stuff online, and I'll send it to you, Troy, and then you can send it out. He's an A-level soccer coach, football coach, which means he can coach at the highest level. And to get an A-level coaching certificate is a hell of an accomplishment. But he was teaching high school PE, and he got frustrated with it, and he said, nope, I want to go back, and I want to coach 7- and 8-year-olds. And he does a thing 3 mornings a week before school called movement. I think he calls it Movement Madness or something like that. And the kids pay 25 cents a week, and they come. He has 50 kids come at 7:30 in the morning. Now the parents want to come, okay? And they just do stuff like this, okay? And look at these kids. Little guys jumping, practicing, landing, taking off, that, okay? Now the next one, this is what he calls, let me see, make sure I get this display right. Just now watch. It starts out with one kid. And because you never want a bunch of kids standing around, right? But watch what happens in a minute. It is total and complete chaos. Pretty soon, every kid is going, and you not see any collisions. And what he's doing, he's taught them different elements of how to stop, how to start. These are 6, 7-year-old kids. They're having just a blast, and look at their movement skills. Okay, now he's already, with this age of kid, right, doing paragraph. That's a paragraph, isn't it? Wouldn't you say? That's a pretty good paragraph, So it can be done. And you see different movement signatures. They don't all look the same, do they? And nor should they look the same. You have different levels of maturation, different sizes. And I think that's pretty cool. Great. So I'll send it to you. What he does is he calls it a movement challenge. He gives the kids a movement challenge once a week, and they grade each other, and then they put it online on this site that they have. And it's open for anybody to see, and that. So it's pretty cool. Now, this is, actually, I found this on the internet, and these are pretty good level javelin throwers. But I would, guys who are again swimming, this is something I'd like to see our swimmers be able to do. We have to find the right mat situation in that. But this is what 45 years ago my gym classes used to do. Okay? We didn't think anything of it. This is what you did. You did dive rolls. You did that kind of stuff. I mean, you can do that with a 7-year-old. You don't need, and nor do you need a mat, right? And these are really important activities in terms of linking, the arm and shoulder to the hips, core development, coordination development, all of these kinds of things. Look at that. Rolls. If you want to test your kids when you go back out to your training venue, just have them do log rolls. It is an education. And I'm talking big kids. I've done it with the, and you say, how do you move? And then put a med ball in their hands and do that. Like, I love this one, right? Isn't that cool? So if you're going to do core work and you're going to do postural strength work, get beyond sit-ups. Look at that. Huh? So you don't have to do that with somebody holding their feet. You be creative, right? Think of good progressions, but weight room without walls. Are those guys strong? I don't know what they can lift, but I'll take them. I'll take them right now and let's put them wherever we want, and then we'll fill in the other pieces, okay? This is Olympic. Actually, he was an Olympic medalist. He's coming back from an injury at U.S. skiing. Nyman, he's a medalist in whatever the last Winter Olympics was. Not in Korea, but whatever. Just doing star movements, and that. And again, because he's an Olympic medalist, I think a 7-year-old should be able to progress to that. There's no reason why you can't, And he's starting this when he's in his 30s. He hadn't done this before. Just imagine he did it only because now he's on the last ropes. He's trying to make it to Korea. His knees are buggered up. He's had 2 knee surgeries and that. So think of it this way. Fundamental movement skills, that would be FMS, leads into general biomotor abilities. And your biomotor abilities are speed, strength, stamina, suppleness, skill. And then leads into your specific biomotor abilities that apply to your particular sport in the proportion for your sport. Obviously, if it's a sprint sport, speed is highly important. Endurance isn't as important, okay? But it's all there. So think of that kind of continuum as you're progressing people and as you're designing programs, okay? So here's when progression, think of this. Start with stable and predictable, controlled environment, and get to unstable and chaotic. Because guys and gals, any competition is unstable and chaotic. That's the reality of what it's totally unpredictable, isn't it? Give the athlete increasingly complex movements to solve. Okay? You don't start with calculus. You start with addition and subtraction and multiplication tables, okay? So you do the same in that. Quality, this is important. We use the word quality a lot. We want quality movement. We want quality practice. How am I doing time-wise? Okay? All right. That's a measure of perfect. So we're always trying to seek a measure of perfect, high quality. Okay? Intensity is a measure of 100%. And by the way, you can't give 110%. It's physiologically impossible. Okay? You go past 100, the system blows up. Okay? Develop 2 C's: competence and confidence. Confidence. If you make them competent at a particular movement and activity, then they're going to be confident in putting that together with other movements to carry it into the chaos of competition. Okay? And if they're and don't be afraid. Now, one thing I realized after I turned the slide presentation is we always talk about progression, and this guy Greg Thompson has a really good term that I like. He says, Vern, we talk always about progression, but I find with my kids, I have to dial it down. I have to regress. So think about, when do I dial it up? When do I dial it down? When do I go back a step? When do I go forward a step? Best to be proactive rather than reactive. Okay? Now, what do we learn? I saw this. This is pure plagiarism, and I can't tell you who I got it from. So if they send a cease and desist letter, I'll find out who I stole it from. What do we learn from skateboarders? There's a place, and if you come to Sarasota and you want to visit me, my downtown office is Pastry Arts. It's a coffee shop. But then 2 afternoons a week, I have a tough life. I go over to, it's called In the Park. And I love it because it's in this park, and it's right next to a skateboard park. And I try to go there on Saturday afternoons and drink an iced tea. Because if you want to see some movement, and you want to see some courage, and you want to see some athletes, watch these skateboarders. They have no inhibitions, and I saw one kid fall 10 times and then nail it, and he got up each time. No parents was there telling him, oh, you're going to get hurt. He had a helmet on. He was smart enough to do that. So what can we learn from skateboarders? Communication and feedback. Nobody tells them what to do. There's no instruction. They figure it out. Okay? Is it high risk? You best believe it is, right? Those things, I'm going like, no, you're not going to really do that, right? But so that's about communication and feedback. So give them enough space to figure it out, okay? Innovation and adaptability. There are multiple solutions to the same challenge, and they're all correct. So kids working on trying to nail a 260 or whatever it might be. A lot of different ways to go at it, isn't there? And again, they're given the freedom to discover. And then emergence. It all stems from the environment. It all stems from the environment. There are really no limits in the environment. Where did a lot of these skateboarders start in the 70s before there were skateboard parks? There's a movie about it on Netflix in it. They went all over Southern California and found abandoned houses with swimming pools that were drained. Okay, and they just figured it out. Use swimming pools, and then they started going down hills and things like that. So we can learn a lot from where I had my eyes open consulting with U.S. Skiing, with free skiing and slopestyle and snowboarders in the half pipe and that, and going up, and that's at 10,000 feet. Killed me I almost died getting up there, but coming from Florida, and hearing one girl land, and you just heard her land, and she goes, the wind went on her, she just pops up, gets it right up to and comes right back, and I'm going, there's a different mindset here about learning and about pushing the envelope. So maybe we need to look at that a little bit more, okay? 24-hour athlete, especially I hear that a lot here. But you know what, you guys, your problems in Singapore aren't as unique as you think they are, with test scores and that. I told at NYSI last week there with the swim coaches, if you go to my swim clubs that I work with in the States in May, it's the same problem that you have here, because IB exams are in May. So the kids, some of them come to practice. If they do, they're shells. A lot of them don't come to practice, And in swimming in the United States, generally the socioeconomic, class of kids are pretty, they're pretty motivated. They're usually upper middle class kids. So the parents are very motivated in school, so they're not getting much sleep, all the same things. So this is a problem we all have to work on and solve. I think part of the message we have to get to the parents and educate the parents. We have to educate the regular teachers that a fresh student, a student who does physical activity is going to do better in school. It's not going to make them tired. But my take-home message is coach the person, not the athlete. Coach the person, not the athlete. It's too easy to put everybody in the same box, okay? And and I can tell you at the most elite level, you can't be a chump off the field and a champ on the field, okay? I mean, great athletes have great routines that, they're not partying all night and doing all that kind of stuff. They might for 1 year or 2 years, but if you you don't see Roger Federer out bar crawling at night, and people that have long careers, they figure it out, real quickly. So, okay? So one of my, I guess I'm going to show my age, but this song was really popular when I was a senior in high school in 1964. Is anybody in here anybody in here around in 1964 besides I knew Rick? A few of you. All right. Okay. You guys weren't old enough, though, to really, did they play this in your crib or anything like that, right? So this is Bob Dylan, right? He's still kicking. He's on tour now. He mumbles a lot and makes a lot of money, and it's brutal. He should just retire. Anyway, and he said the first ones now will later be last, for the times they are a-changing. The first ones now, this year, will later be last, for the times they are a-changing. And times are changing fast. If you think because you won a world championship this year, you're going to do the same thing and win a world championship next year, you're in for a rude awakening. If you think you won a Singapore championship this year, you're in for a rude awakening. And that's today, and that was true 40, 50 years ago too. Okay? So the times are changing. And if this is, so the next part of this talk is about what you can do as a coach, as a person, as a teacher, as a parent, as a mentor, to change the world. I thought when I started teaching 50 years ago, I was going to change the world. And I went to hear Robert Kennedy speak on April 26, 1968, my senior year in college, and I got so fired up, and guess what? I went and voted for him, and that night he got killed. And I get chills when I think about it, and I go, shit, excuse my French. I don't think I'm going to be able to change the world because somebody might shoot him or something like that. But it took me a few years to figure this out. But you know what? I can change my world, right? And my world is concentric circles, who I can influence in that. And my advice as an old man, and I've seen a lot of people do this now, if you can change your world, and enough of you change your own worlds, then the world will change, right? As opposed to saying, I'm going to change the world, okay? So I'll share with you what some of my thoughts here are on that. Here's some simple rules that I've evolved in terms of how to change. Notice I said again, your world. And I think these are common sense, and I'll give you, how am I doing time-wise? I just want to make sure that I don't go too fast. Don't seem to be concerned. So, Rick, you should have been up here today. 5 minutes? Oh, that's an eternity. Stay basic. Stay basic. Okay? I put a post on the other day. Here's one way to stay basic. Do a tech-free day once a week in your life and in coaching. Especially in your coaching. Leave your cell phone, your GoPro, your iPad in the office or in your car. And go out and talk to your athletes and watch your athletes. Stay basic. And it comes back to fundamentals, isn't it? That's not complicated. But it's a lot harder than you think it is. Because Apple has a new thing now. If you have an iPhone, and it says screen time every week. And it tells you what you did. And I listened to Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, talk about it the other day. And he said, it was a shock to me. He said, that changed my world right away. He said, I got the hell off of 90% of my emails because most of it was irrelevant. People were just emailing me because they could. Stay basic. Stay basic. Stay hungry. No matter how much success you've had or how good you are, you've got to work to get better. Okay? And that doesn't have to be a negative. Okay? It can be really challenging and really fun. Stay focused. Stay focused. And learn how to change your focus. A lot of times people think that, if everybody look up here, that being really good is having like a narrow laser focus. I think in observation more and more that really great people can laser in when they have to and pull back when they need to too. Okay? So that's part of the focus, is learning how to zero in and zero out at the appropriate times. Okay? And that can help you a lot to change your world. Stay excited. I think hopefully you can get from me, I get pretty fired up. Anytime I can be around coaches, that's a really great day. And we should be really excited about what we do, because we have the opportunity every day, like Stefan said too, and both of us he's actually from Switzerland. My parents were from Switzerland. I'm going to go over 3 minutes, but just stay with me. My first year coaching, my father was an immigrant to the United States, had no education, but he was the head groundskeeper of the school that I was working at. It was a beautiful campus, and down below there was a hillside, and his shed where he kept the lawnmowers and the tools were up above. I'm down, it's a beautiful sunny spring day. I've got shorts on and a t-shirt, and I'm coaching the shot putters. And I happen to look up. My dad ended work at 4 o'clock. He's standing there like this. And I know what's going through his head. He said, I put this kid through college. I sacrificed to put him through college. And he's down there standing there in a t-shirt and shorts. Okay? And so fast forward 40 years, 35 years later, I go out to visit him. He's on his last legs. I take him for a ride, and he's kind of feeble, and he puts his hand on my leg in the car, and he said, now, because you're okay, you have a job. He couldn't figure out how I could make a living coaching. I never worked a day in my life. I haven't worked a day in my life. I've been to all these countries. Great people like you, great countries like Singapore. Okay? It's exciting. That's what's cool about coaching. Okay? Stay uncomfortable. Great people are comfortable with being uncomfortable all the time. Have you ever got around Michael Jordan? His teammates hated him. Okay, I remember walking into the gym one day. Michael and I were walking like this. I'm not doing this name. You guys know who Michael Jordan is? Don't even know who Michael Jordan is. He was a pretty good basketball player, right? So we walked along. He's next to me like this, and I start to get ahead of him. He walks faster to get ahead of me. That's why, I mean, there is no freaking way that he was going to let anybody beat him in practice. He get fist fights with his teammates in practice when they weren't any good. Okay? Stay uncomfortable. Stay you. Stay you. Even if you're successful or if you're not successful, be you. Be the best you can be. Okay? Stay passionate. Passion is the fuel. It's high octane fuel. Okay? Passion is the fuel, man. That's what sustains you. Because you know what? There's going to be days, even though when there's going to be days when you go out, you don't want to go to the track. There's going to be days when it just isn't happening, right? And you've got to stay passionate, all right? Stay a child. I love Dr. Seuss. One of the coolest parts of being a parent was reading Dr. Seuss stories. You guys read Dr. Seuss? It's pretty universal. If you don't, we should make it part of the coaching curriculum. Eggs and ham and Star-Bellied Sneetches is a really good story about prejudice and accepting people. And I've used that with teams at various times. This is what Dr. Seuss said. I like nonsense. It wakes up the brain cells. Fantasy is a necessary ingredient in living. It's a way of looking at life through the wrong end of a telescope. Okay? I mean, that's cool. Look at life through the wrong end of a telescope. You know? Go up if you coach track or field and you're in a stadium, go to the top of the stadium sometime and watch practice. You know, we need to do that swimming a little bit more too. Go up on that catwalk up above. I'll let you go, not me. Okay? Here's the other thing. Smiles will get you miles. Right? Go out to practice this afternoon and stand there like this. And watch how your team responds. Instead of, you don't have to be phony, but how you doing today? I mean, this morning it was cool. I'm excited to be here. Just walk around. How you doing? People engage me in and like I said, the 2 taxi drivers the last 2 days, that was worth the price of admission. You know, like where are you from? Where you you know, that. I learned more about Singapore in an hour, you know, than I probably learned in all the books that I've read in the time that I've been here. You know. Smiles will get you miles, okay? And how many of you read this book? Oh my gosh, no? You know what the book is? The Little Engine That Could. That's Coaching 101. Everybody has to, okay, everybody say after me. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. My mother had no education, but loved to read and got instilled in me. I read 156 books last year. And she would read. I said, Mom, can we read The Little Engine That Could? And I mean, to this day, I do that. My daughter was getting real. She works for this big international company. And she had this big meeting on the internet with Japan. And I said, Tina, 2 things. Just think about The Little Engine That Could, and remember to get the butterflies flying in formation. She said, I'm nervous, Dad. I said, if you're not nervous, you won't do good in the meeting. Get the butterflies flying in formation, and think about, I think I can, I think I can. Okay? All right? And then the last thing you do, look at the screen. Right? Every day, put an exclamation point on what you do. We are so lucky to do what we do, because we can have more impact on people than anybody, even sometimes more than parents. Not that we want to necessarily be like that, and so that's special. So you guys are really special. It's really special to be able to present to you, and I thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for letting me go over.
Testing. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the most engaging keynote. Can we put our hands together again for Vern? And can I invite you to sit over there? Yeah. So we're going to take on a few questions. If you have questions to ask, we have mics on the side. Yeah. So if you have any questions, then maybe just can stand up and ask that question. Well, I've got one to start. Lots of stuff there, lots of really meaningful stuff for me personally. So in all those things that you want us to think about, if I want to start off making a change and making a difference and start coaching better the next day, what would be your advice on what would be the first thing to do?
It was alluded to several times earlier. I'm sorry. It's alluded to make daily self-reflection part of your coaching. Coaching Better Every Day is a book by Wade Gilbert, and I had him present at Gain 3 or 4 years ago twice, and I know that really great coaches do it kind of informally, and it can be really informal. It doesn't have to be formal, but make self-reflection part of your daily practice, and because that's how you get better every day, and you can get better a lot faster if you do that. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Vern. So think about reflection, yeah? Questions? Yes, Marco. Yeah.
Just for Mr. Gambetta to recommend, like, for example, up to 5 books.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I just did it on the podcast the other day. Well, Rick's book, The Coach, I think is right. The Coach is your first book, Rick. Yeah, that's really good. If you haven't read that, because I saw Rick back. Not trying to score points with him, but it's a really good coaching book. There's a book, 4th edition, track and field omnibook. Ostensibly, it's about track and field, but it was written by a man named Ken Doherty, who's passed away, but I wish I could sit in a conversation with he and Rick, because he was a real Renaissance man, a coach at UPenn, and it's a great coaching text. Gosh, what else? The Playmaker's Advantage is a new book by Len Zykowski that I think brings all the current thinking, and I want to say sports psychology, but on the role of the brain, really, and current, not voodoo research, but valid research and things that we can use as a coach. It's really quite good. It's new. It's new. I really recommend that one. Oh gosh, 5 books. What else? Help me. Somebody help me. It's funny because I read. I guess I read too many books, and I'm struggling for other books. In terms of, I think it's very important, even though I sound like I'm anti-sport science or something like that, but I try to go back once a year as a coach and go through. I don't read it from cover to cover because it's 1,000 pages. Catch and McCardle's textbook of exercise physiology because in this year it was really focusing in, because I've really gotten fascinated with the brain science, and so that part of it, that, and in terms of biomechanics, I think reading it's an older book called by Kragenbaum and Barthels, qualitative analysis of movement. That's five. But I can give you, more. There's certainly some coaching classics that we've gotten away from that I think are really important too. That people go, oh, that's old stuff, but it's good stuff. It's Keith David's book on not on nonlinear, but constraints-led approach to. That's become like a handbook, and then the book that the speaker on nonlinear pedagogy, I think, are really important for coaches today too. Yeah. Does that help? Okay. And I'll give you. I mean, I've got a whole list if you want it that I can give you too. So.
Thanks, Vern. Right, I think there may be more questions from the audience, but maybe a bit too shy to ask. So we're going to head for tea break. And I think Rick will also be available during tea break, and you can ask Vern questions as well. Vern is going to be here for quite a bit, working with swimming. So if you want to take him out for karaoke and sing Bob Dylan songs and Bob Marley and Johnny Cash, just ask him, and I'm sure he'll be happy to go out with you and sing some songs. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, put our hands together again for Vern Gambetta.